So let's go ahead now and move on over to talk about the collegiate football endeavors of the state of Indiana as we move away from the NFL. If you watched us in our pregame or our preseason special for Indiana college football, we did something called the Indiana Ambassador Rankings. That was a way for us to rank the exciting teams around the state. Obviously, if we just ranked flat on skill, obviously, you could pretty much guess what those rankings would look like. Notre Dame would be at the top. They would never move. It would be boring. So we're like, hey, what teams excite us around the state? What teams can we talk about that we don't typically talk about? And so here's how the rankings look like in the preseason. We had Ball State number 1 coming off of their amazing 6-1 MAC championship, first bowl win in school history season. We had IU at number 2 because they had big aspirations. We thought, hey, they're ranked 17th. They
are who I thought they were.
Their fan base was very excited. Thought
they're so boring now that the fan base is tearing out bleachers and crowd surfing them down from the top of the stadium. You know who's going to be really upset about that? Not the athletic department, the geese that are going to have to come in and take over those empty seats as the season progresses.
They're really upset about that. Like, you're messing up our real estate here.
Where am I supposed to go poop if I'm a goose? Where? For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, there was a big thing, I think it was last year or the year before, where like half the IU football stadium was empty during a football game, and like all the bleachers, actually it was the Purdue IU game, I think, and I don't know which one, but all the bleachers that were not filled were just covered in goose poop. Just absolutely covered in goose poop. Like, they had no idea they were having a football game, and they were like, oh my gosh, we should have probably cleaned these off. Like, huh?
Also, I need to contact our editor to clip out. Where am I supposed to poop? We need to use that as a soundbite whenever we need it. We had Notre Dame at number 3 because they were just kind of bland. They're where they usually are every year. Can they do something to impress us? Marion from the NAIA we had at 4. And then we had Purdue at 5. So now we, looking back at this past weekend, we had 2 of those teams play. Number 12 Notre Dame against Purdue. The Fighting Irish do get the win, 27-13. It was 10-3 Notre Dame at halftime. A 62-yard pass to Avery Davis for Notre Dame makes it 17-6. Jack Plummer had a touchdown pass to Milton Wright. He gets the Boilers back within 4. But then a Kyron Williams 51-yard touchdown run makes it 27-13, and that is the final score. Jack Cohn was 15-30 for 223 yards and 2 touchdowns for Notre Dame. Avery Davis had 5 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown. Jack Plummer for the Boilers, 25 for 36, 187 yards and a touchdown. We also had IU. They fell to 1-2. Number 8 Cincinnati beats the Hoosiers, 38-24. Michael Penix had 2 touchdown passes to give IU the early 14-0 lead. Cincinnati fans were definitely not excited about that one. But it was 14-10 Hoosiers at the half. After losing the lead, DJ Matthews had a touchdown run to give IU the 21-17 lead in the third quarter. But then that ensuing kickoff, Trey Tucker runs it back 99 yards for a touchdown to answer. It's 24-23 IU after the third. In the fourth quarter, Desmond Ridder throws a 19-yard touchdown pass to Alec Pierce, and then Ridder runs it in 7 yards for a touchdown. They get the 2-point conversion, which makes it the 38-24 final score. Michael Penix Jr. was 17 for 40, 224 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Desmond Ridder was 20 of 36 for 210 yards, a touchdown and interception. Jerome Ford, 20 carries, 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. Alec Pierce, 5 catches, 86 yards, and a touchdown for the Bearcats. So let's go ahead and look at what the Indiana Ambassador rankings look like now as far as what teams excite us across the state. So we'll go 1 through 5 here. Number 1 for us is going to be, B. Scott and I are in agreement on this all the way through. Notre Dame is number one, and the reason why they're number one, it's more or less by default. They're holding number one by the hair on their chin. You know,
I had it as 1A and 1B.
You know the goatee that the Irish mascot has. That's the hair that they're clinging on to that one spot in our rankings, because they're the best and likely only shot an Indiana school has at the college football playoff. So, B. Scott, you and I were talking about, before the show, that there's a possibility, at least I think so, that if they lose one game, which I think in my opinion, the way they've looked the first few weeks of the season, where, they needed overtime to beat Florida State, who's now 0-3 after getting their doors blown off by Wake, after losing on a Hail Mary to Jacksonville State. Notre Dame barely squeaked past Toledo, winning 32-29. Now, granted, Toledo has gone into places like Arkansas and won. They've gone into Minnesota when Minnesota had Marion Barber and won. They, if you remember him, that's a name out of the hat. And then...
Oh, Purdue fans know Marion Barber.
Yes, true. Toledo has a history of being just a school that can get it done on the road in a hostile environment.
Toledo's gone into Purdue and beaten Purdue.
Right. And so, still, though, it was similar to the game that Ball State played against them a few years ago, as far as being really close. But just Notre Dame doesn't look very good. And then they play number 18 Wisconsin at Soldier Field this Saturday. So that or the Cincinnati game, I see them losing one or both of those games. But losing one, in my opinion, puts them out of the college football. They won't truly be out until the rankings are put out, or they lose two games. But even comparing them with other teams that are ahead of them, like let's talk about Clemson, number 9. Their one loss right now is to Georgia, so that already is a better loss should Notre Dame lose to anybody else on their schedule. You have Ohio. Well, I don't know, Ohio State. Yeah, Ohio State's in front of them. Their loss to Oregon doesn't look as bad as whoever Notre Dame might lose to. So, there's other teams that I think would get in over Notre Dame should they lose. And like I said, I think they're on the path to losing.
If they lose to Cincinnati, Cincinnati's ahead of them.
Right. Well, Cincinnati's already ahead of them.
Cincinnati's got a clearer path into the playoff than Notre Dame does. Honestly, I believe, because of how front-loaded Notre Dame's schedule is, their back end of their schedule is very winnable. And they could easily, I guess you're right, they could back into a playoff spot, but with everybody else having such stronger schedules that time of year than Notre Dame, it's going to be tough. I don't know. It would be a very strong, big uphill battle for Notre Dame to back their way into a playoff spot with one loss. There's a lot of other teams that have one loss that would get in ahead of them.
That's what I'm saying.
But it's just basically that. So you're saying there's a chance?
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying, is that their only way to get in, I guess I could have phrased that better. The only way they're going to get in is if they back their way in. Kind of like what they did last year when there was really no choice, because the 8 teams behind them also lost their championship games. So the committee was like, what do we do? Let's take Notre Dame. So yeah, they definitely have it tough. So we'll see. So they're number 1 for now. We'll see what happens going forward. Now, number 2 on our list, and B. Scott, I made them number 2 before you even looked at the list. So, we can't call you a homer here. Number 2, and like you said, they're 1A and 1B for you, and I honestly, agree. Purdue...
because I say 1A and 1B because I'm not looking at from a playoff potential. I don't think Notre Dame's a playoff caliber team this year. So I'm basing off of you know how we kind of started off as the exciting factor. Yeah. Purdue has been much more exciting this year to watch than Notre Dame. Notre Dame has been kind of like nail biter exciting just because are they going to pull this out? Whereas Purdue, they've just been exciting.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're coming off their loss to Notre Dame, but Purdue has looked strong. in their first 3 weeks of the season. You have Jack Plummer right now completing 72% of his passes, 7 touchdowns to no interceptions, which is really cool. Of course, we were in attendance game 1 against Oregon State. The house was rocking. Really fun environment there. Go check out the vlog on YouTube. 3C Media. And then they do play Illinois, Minnesota, both winnable games. The Illini are 1-3, having lost 3 straight, including a loss to UT San Antonio. Minnesota fell to Ohio State on the opening Thursday, squeaked by Miami of Ohio by 4 before blowing out Colorado 30-0. So those, in theory, I'm going to say in theory because I'm not going to say they are, because that means next week they're going to go out and lose to Illinois. But they should be, in theory, tune-up games for them to then play number 5 Iowa and number 18 Wisconsin in back-to-back weeks in mid-October. So that's what makes them exciting, because they could at that point be 5-1.
No, 4-1.
4-1. Okay, so at that point they could be 4-1. Math is hard. They could be 4-1 going into those games. That, I mean, I'm not really 1,000% sold on Iowa. I'm really surprised that they got all the way up to number 5. I know it's because Iowa State was highly ranked. I'm not saying Iowa's overrated. I just think, so I guess technically I am, but I don't think they're.
Look 5. At Iowa's win. Iowa's first 2 wins of the season were big wins over ranked opponents. I mean, they blew the doors off of, at the time, number 17 Indiana, and then they beat Iowa State. They did struggle a little bit early on against Kent State, and then they righted that ship and blew them out as well. I'll tell you what, when I look at the Purdue schedule, I don't see Purdue going into Iowa and beating Iowa. I think more so you get through that game and head into at home against number 18 Wisconsin and pull an upset there. That's the way I look at but I'll tell you what, even looking at the Purdue schedule, if Purdue were to beat every unranked team on the remainder of their schedule and lose to every ranked team on the remainder of their schedule, that still finishes the season 7-5.
Yeah, which is right where we have.
Remember how I said that first game against Oregon State was a crucial game? Yes, It was. Just like these next 2 games are crucial as well. They're all crucial at this point, but when you play in the Big Ten, going into the Big Ten season, they're all crucial. But to be able to start off the Big Ten season 2-0 would put them right up there in the catbird, especially with 2 division opponents, would put them up there battling at least going into Iowa for a spot in the Big Ten championship game. Obviously, that's not going to happen, But
see, that's why they're the excitement ratings, because they could happen. And that's what makes them exciting. Because if they're 4-1...
If there is a team in the Big Ten that Jeff Brom has the number of, not called Ohio State because he's 1-0 against Ohio State, but it is Iowa. He is 3-1 at Purdue against Iowa. And he's had some big wins at Iowa. I mean, obviously, year 1, they went in there with their season essentially on the line and pulled off a pretty big stunner in Iowa City.
Yeah. So I'm really excited for what they can do. So that's why they are number 2. Number 3 for us is Ball State. They dropped from 1 to 3. They struggled with Western Illinois week 1. They lost to Penn State, which obviously that was expected, but then they get obliterated in Laramie against Wyoming. And it doesn't get any easier with the Toledo team that lost to Notre Dame by 3 and a Western Michigan team the following weekend that is 2-1, including a win this past weekend over Pitt. So it doesn't get any easier for Ball State. That's why they're 3, because our rankings are just top 5, so 3 obviously right in the middle. And it's kind of like we were with Notre Dame, where okay, the ceiling is you could get up there, but also we're not super impressed with where you are right now, so you're either going to go up, you're going to win against Toledo and Western Michigan, and we're going to shoot you up the rankings, or you're going to lose to Toledo and Western Michigan, and you're going to probably fall out because you're going to be in really dire straits to even try to make another MAC championship game. So Ball State right in the middle for me. As far as, hey, I still have hope that they can right the ship and get to where we believe they could be preseason, but also I'm ready to just say, all right, you're just going to drop down. Obviously, it's not destined for Ball State to have 2 really great seasons in a row. So, you know what? Maybe it's just time to bite that bullet, but we'll see. I'm still leaving them at number 3.
Hey, you know what? I mean, just like Purdue, I guess even more so. I feel like the non-conference really does not matter all that much for Ball State. Was Ball State going to be contending for a playoff spot?
Yes.
No, they weren't.
Yes,
they just weren't. What really starts mattering is now going into the MAC conference schedule. Remember, this is Ball State only played MAC opponents last year until the bowl game, and that is where they really shined. So I think they can do that again. They have the ability to right the ship and jump back up in these rankings, because now they're getting into the bread and butter of their schedule, where I think they're gonna excel.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Wyoming is not a slouch of a football program, and having to go all the way out to Wyoming, that is not easy. There's a lot of factors there. That is also, you're playing. It is
the highest.
You're playing up in thin air. So it's not an easy game to play. It's a lot of things are stacked against you going into that game. So like I said, I'm not worried. In week 1, struggling against Western Illinois, the FCS. I cover FCS now, and I'll tell you what. The talk is, how many games each week can the FCS pull over FBS teams? And they just play up for them. Is Washington really that bad, losing to Montana? Montana's really good,
yeah.
But they just played up, and it was week 1. Week 1, a lot of teams come out of the gate slow in week 1, and that's what, these types of things happen. So I'm not panicking about Ball State at all. I think Ball State will be fine, and I think we'll potentially see Ball State playing in Detroit again come December.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is that that's why they're in the middle, because these next 2 weeks are going to be pivotal, because those are 2 teams that you're likely going to be fighting against to get to Detroit. So number 4 for us is our token non-FBS school. We have to, and actually, you know what? I shouldn't say that, because I actually am very excited to have the Indiana Wesleyan Wildcats on our rankings, because they're 3-0 to start the season, and what do they do to open things up? They upset FCS Valpo 28-10 opening weekend.
That's what happens. NAIA plays up to beat the FCS. FCS plays up to beat the FBS. Yeah. It's just the way it is.
They did win by forfeit in week 2, so that's another dub. You'll take that every time. And then they upset NAIA number 6 Olivet Nazarene this past weekend, 52-28. They're number 25.
That's not just an upset. That's a drubbing.
Right. And so, when we did the outline yesterday, they were number 25. They've obviously risen the rankings since then. That's behind Devonde Alford, who's got 46 carries for 290 yards and 5 touchdowns. And then they play Marion on October 9th. So that's going to be a really good game, for the NAIA. A really, people forget this IWU program is not that old. They just recently got their football team, and they're playing really good football right now. So hey, maybe that's a tailgate spot next year if we can get it circled on the calendar, because IWU is playing really good football.
Yeah. I love seeing these smaller schools have success. It's so surprising. People don't get it. Indiana seems to be a hotbed for NAIA football. Marion, IWU. I know I'm missing
St. Francis.
St. Francis. It's unreal. Taylor, yeah.
Taylor's usually pretty good.
There's a lot of good teams around, and
just in general, lower level, like D3, even like Wabash, DePaul can sometimes be up there. Hanover, I think, was a team that I thought about putting in their preseason, because I think they were ranked or close to being ranked. So
yeah.
Indy.
These are programs that, hey, if you want to get your young kids out to a football game and don't want to have to pay an arm and a leg to take them there and everything, go to one of these games. They're not expensive by any means. It's family friendly environments. go support these small programs. You know, I mean, Purdue's going to get theirs, IU's going to get theirs, Ball State will get theirs, and same with Notre Dame. But, you know, go watch an IWU game. Go watch a Marion or St. Francis. Why not? Go support them. Go have some fun. It's good football. It's still college football, and guess what? Some of these guys end up in the NFL as well.
Right. Finally, rounding out the rankings is IU. I thought about putting I thought about putting like Marion or St. Francis here, but I was like, you know what? The audience isn't ready for two NAIA schools in the rankings. We can get them later on in the year.
We could put Indiana State.
Yeah, that's true. Indiana State, I think, is 2-1. So,
Yeah.
you know, even though IU is 1-2, they could still be spoiler. They're still a good team. Like, people think that, like, I mean, granted, we have hated on
issues at quarterback. We definitely
have hated on IU on the podcast before, but like we just know what the expectations are with the fan base, and we know where they are actually. And so it's obviously those are differing points of view. You know, some of the IU fan base thinks that IU should be playing for the Rose Bowl every year, and this year was maybe the year that it looked like it could potentially come to fruition. And we even said before the season started that like it's just not going to be that way. So, you know, they could still be a spoiler. Like I said, they're still a good team. They have Western Kentucky this weekend, so that should be a dub. That'll get them back to 500. And then 4 of their next 5 games are against ranked teams. They go to number 6 Penn State. Then they have number 20 Michigan State. Then they have number 10 Ohio State. And then I think they have somebody in the middle of Ohio State and then number 19 Michigan. So, I mean, they could really throw a wrench into the Big Ten or potentially even the playoff if they grab a win in one of those 4 games, especially if one of those 4 wins is against Ohio State or Penn State. And I mean, we can roll our eyes at Ohio State, but I mean, Ohio State's been struggling these past few weeks, so we'll see what they look like come Big Ten season. But you know, if Penn State and Iowa look like to be the kind of 2 front runners right now in the Big Ten, and if you know, IU were to, I mean, they already lost to Iowa, but if they were to, you know, slip, you know, cause Penn State to slip up or beat Ohio State, who then turns around and beats Penn State, you know, it could really not only take the Big Ten out of the college football playoff conversation, but could also change up who we're going to see in Indianapolis first weekend of December.
Yeah, they still can play spoiler, but they really need to get Michael Penix Jr. figured out. He's throwing more interceptions than he has touchdowns, and I mean, and they can't count the touchdowns that he throws to the other team. That's a big issue, and it's going to be tough. If there's a game on that, if there's a couple of games there that they can win, I'll say Michigan State potentially. I'm still not 100% sold on the Spartans, even though they did beat Miami, but not sold on Miami.
A game selected by the CraigCrash Wheel of Misery, Michigan State, to upset Miami. Well, what's crazy is Miami struggled to get by App State. So I even said in the video, I was like, this may be one of the easier picks to just say Michigan State, because Michigan State has looked like a strong team, and Miami has just been, you know, out of their sorts these first 3 weeks.
But I think the Ohio State game may be the best bet if you have to put money down on IU winning one of those ranked matchups, mostly because it is at IU and the Ohio State defense just hasn't been playing very well. Do I have any faith in IU's offense being able to stop Ohio State's or IU's defense being able to stop Ohio State's offense right now? I don't know, because the Ohio State offense is kind of clicking, and it's tough. I mean, they have really, really good wide receivers, and even if one quarterback's struggling, they have another 5-star quarterback in the wings waiting. So that would be tough. But I mean, it could be a shootout like it was last year at Ohio State. I don't know. I do not have any faith in IU going into Penn State and winning that game. No way. Penn State's going to be too fired up after what happened to them last year at IU. So, no, I think IU gets buried in that game.
So, just to recap, we've got number 1 as Notre Dame, number 2 Purdue, number 3 Ball State, number 4 Indiana Wesleyan, and number 5 IU. That's our Indiana Ambassador rankings, where we rank the most exciting teams in Indiana. So we'll reconvene in a couple of more weeks, see where they are after heading into those big matchups that we talked about.